SABC, host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa 2025.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says the United States remains an important market for South Africa and the country wants to continue strengthening trade relations. He added that South Africa will keep engaging the United States on political matters as well. Ramaphosa also referenced the symbolic handover of the G20 presidency in an empty chair, highlighting the significance of global cooperation. Now, he made these remarks in Kliptown, Soweto, while participating in a city cleanup campaign. This is, of course, ahead of the G20 summit, which will take place at the Nasrec Expo Center on the 22nd and 23rd of November.
There could well be a view that we should not engage with the United States, but the United States is an important market. And in fact, we want to engage more with their businesses. It's less about other things, but with their businesses, because governments facilitate the engagement at trade level, at economic level. So we want to continue trading with the businesses of the United States, with the people of the United States, because we export products to that country. That in the end don't end up in the White House. They end up in the hands of consumers in the United States. So that is our great interest. The other issues are political, and as normal, we will continue dealing with the political issues. And sometimes you have to talk to people who may not be very friendly to you to advance the interests of your own people. So we will be doing so, and sometimes you've got to do what people may think is unpalatable. But I'm prepared to do it to advance the interests of South Africans.
Now, it's exactly 8 days to the G20 Leaders Summit. Let's bring in SABC News Specialist correspondent Sophie Mokoena to give us the very latest about who's attending the G20 and who is not, and what's the possible impact of this absence. Good afternoon, Sophie. Thank you very much for joining us. Firstly, for the benefit of those who might not have a full appreciation of the history of the G20, just take us through all the way to where it started and where it stands now as a premium forum for international economic cooperation.
Well, it started in 2007, where the ministers of finance and the central bank governors came together after Canada and the United States of America made a proposal that there should be such a forum. It was the finance ministers. And we know that since inception, South Africa has been part of this development. That is why, yes, it will be the first time South Africa at the head of state level or summit is hosting the G20, and for the first time the African continent hosting the G20 at the Leaders Summit. But Trevor Manuel, our former finance minister, was once the president of the G20 when it was at the ministerial level. When it was elevated, things changed. And you then had finance tracking, continuing with a Sherpa and ministers. And later the introduction, after it became a leaders summit, where you had now foreign affairs ministers and international ministers, in South Africa's case, playing a role. And therefore, South Africa has been there. And the main focus came as a result of these leaders, these countries, realizing that the multilateral system like your UN, your IMF, your World Bank are not so focused in terms of predicting and seeing those early warning systems where the global economy can be in trouble. And therefore, the financial crisis in Asia, the challenges there, strengthen the resolve to really make this forum to become a forum where you look at the future, what it holds for you and how you can intervene should there be economic crisis, but then bring in the leaders. It was George Bush, the American president, who presided during the first summit of leaders when it was elevated to that. And since then, because normally that's how media operates, you look at the most senior newsmaker. That's why the attention most of the time is on the leaders. But that's the leaders, they come to sign. The work is done by ministers all year round. And this week, they will continue with that. The Sherpa meeting on Monday, where countries will be negotiating so that you have the declaration that will then be signed by presidents. And by the time they come here, they are here just for ceremonial and sign and bilateral.
Undoubtedly a very important forum. Then to those world leaders that will be in attendance and those who will be sending representatives perhaps. Reports have surfaced, Sophie, that Argentina's right-leaning president will not be in attendance, and we've also seen unconfirmed reports of China's president possibly skipping the summit. What do we know for a fact at this very point?
We know the U.S. has made it clear through its president that no one will attend. However, don't rule out officials from the embassy participating in the meetings, because they know very well what they stand to lose, and they are incoming. Of course, Mexico will send a delegation and someone to represent, because it's up to countries who you send at the summit level of heads of state. And judging from the current global challenges we have that are mainly security related, some people won't be able to attend. I mean, take, for example, President Putin is not coming because of the warrant of arrest, but the Prime Minister is coming. And then you look at Mexico, there are challenges in terms of security and what U.S. has been doing to try and also almost interfering in the security affairs of Mexico. So it becomes an issue, but they will have representation. You look at the very same Argentina, yes, the head of state is not coming, but the announcement that there will be people who will be representing Argentina. You go to China. China, yes, Xi Jinping has not been traveling. He wasn't at the India G20. He was not at the BRICS in Brazil. He is not at COP in Brazil right now. And that's in fact, having him during our BRICS summit, it was such a huge thing, because he doesn't often travel. But he is going to send a high-powered delegation. Therefore, it's not so much about who's here. Yes, media, we tend to focus on that. For me, the story is right now what's happening behind the scenes, the negotiations, and the work towards building a declaration. There's already a coup. South Africa was able to pull a diplomatic coup because finance ministers have already agreed on the text in terms of finance tracking, which is the main focus.
And I suppose it is important that you insert, when it comes to Xi Jinping, that he has not been traveling, so that a false narrative is not created that perhaps there's a posture now being taken against South Africa where they'll be boycotting. But just in closing, Sophie, some still are attempting to elevate the absence of the United States at the summit. They've even created scenarios. I've read articles this morning where they're creating scenarios where the absence could be felt, perhaps the inability to reach consensus for the adoption of that G20 Johannesburg Leaders Declaration. Some, of course, view this as an exaggeration, but nevertheless, there are those who have raised this concern. So just clarify for us, will the US's absence really have any impact or negative consequences of
The US was at the last 3 summits. There were no consensus. Since the war in Ukraine, people who follow and cover G20 will know that there has been divisions, including in the finance tracking. But for the first time, ahead of this leaders summit, there's consensus and there's agreement on finance tracking, which is the main responsibility why G20 was formed. The political issues, there will always be those issues and posturing. And therefore, it's not the first time where there's no agreement on a declaration. It started 3 years ago because of the global challenges. So anyone who will be hosting G20 in these volatile times globally, you will never have a declaration. Even America next year, there's a likelihood that they won't be able to agree on a declaration, because the past 3 summit declaration has been a problem. But there's always a statement of those leaders who are saying, much as this one doesn't agree, we're going this way. And there has been support for South Africa's team by the European Union member countries, including your Brazil, your China, your Russia. And therefore, I think, yes, there might not be a declaration, but we don't know because negotiations are currently underway. And perhaps the absence of the United States of America, if they don't participate completely, those leaders who are there are going to agree we might have a Johannesburg summit, not only in terms of finance tracking, but including the burning issues. And therefore, these are the stories and understanding around what's happening with the G8, G20. But as I speak, Monday will be very crucial going forward until that ceremonial photo op of leaders.
Sophie, always a pleasure to have you with us in studio. That's SABC News Specialist correspondent Sophie Mokoena. Just to remind you, it is indeed 8 days to the G20 Leaders Summit. And of course, the public broadcaster is the host broadcaster, so we'll most certainly be bringing you up-to-the-minute updates and analysis, live coverage of that Leaders Summit.